係按程序係選舉主席啦，就有冇
Election of chairman, any nomination? Mr. Tenkapio, I second. Let me try, so please bear with me if I am not doing a good enough job. Shall we invite the administration in, please? Secretary.
都應該要講翻先啦。喺呢度首先多謝。
First of all, very warm welcome to officials. Let me introduce our guests. Mr. Patrick Chen, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing. Ms. Cordelia Lam, Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing. Mr. Albert Su, Assistant Commissioner for Transport. Mr. Michael Ng, Principal Transport Officer. And from the DOJ, we have Ms. Carmen Kwok. I omitted one thing. Let me get it out of the way first. I have received from Dr. KWOK Ka-ki an application to join this committee. Any objection? If not, welcome, Dr. Kwok. Shall we invite the administration to take us through the bill, through the brief, please? Chairman, in early April, we submitted a resolution to the Council regarding Section Cap 375 and Schedule 11 to Cap 375 regarding the 4 tunnels under BOT and also the amendments that took effect on 20th of July 2012, and they are the Cap 215E EXC, the 436D WXC, Yuen Long Approach Road 4773, and under the ordinance, anybody committing the offence and be held responsible for the offence, they will be slapped on double the DOP. Anybody offending the road markings to the detriment of road safety, the penalty has been incorporated into the DOP system as scheduled offence in order to curb any offences. There are 4 BOT tunnel bylaws, and there are traffic offences under them. The operators did move amendments to all these bylaws, and in July 2012 they have been endorsed by the Council. The amendment to these bylaws is in order to standardize the markings of the auto toll to align them with the government requirements, and for they would be standardized with the BOT tunnels. Other than the standardizing the BOT tunnel bylaws, the motorists will have to observe the traffic signs and the traffic lights and all the texts, and the references to the ordinance will be amended. Under 375, the references and the text have not been correspondingly amended, and therefore in 375, the references to the schedule do does not tally with the amended bylaws. Well, in fact, these will not affect the implementation of the 4 tunnel bylaws. The tunnel company can still penalize traffic offenders according to the relevant provisions of the tunnel bylaws. However, to enable the incurrence of DOPs against persons who are convicted of traffic offences under the amended tunnel bylaws, the schedule to CAP 375 has to be amended to align the references, including text and section numbers of the BOT tunnel-related traffic offences mentioned therein to tally with the amended tunnel bylaws. In this resolution, we also propose that there will be a new scheduled offence in the schedule to CAP 375 in order to align with the restriction imposed by Section 40 of the Road Traffic Ordinance, CAP 374. The maximum speed limit for vehicles is 70 kilometers an hour. However, in the bylaws, the maximum limit for buses, medium goods vehicles, heavy goods vehicles, as well as motorcycles, motor tricycles, private cars, or light goods vehicles driven by a person holding a probationary driving license is 70 kilometers an hour. We are of the view that the relevant offences should be included in the schedule to CAP 375, such that DOPs would be incurred against drivers of buses, medium goods vehicles, heavy goods vehicles, as well as persons holding a probationary driving license who drive motorcycles, motor tricycles, private cars, or light goods vehicles upon their conviction of driving at a speed exceeding 70 kilometers per hour. And Section 72(1)(a), or we need to amend Schedule 11 to CAP 374 and all the references there. All the proposed amendments of a technical nature, they're intended to rectify all the references to tally with the 4 BOT tunnel bylaws. I urge members to support the resolution. I welcome members' questions. We try our best to address members' questions. Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary, for the presentation. Let me say this before we put questions. Under Road Traffic Driving Offence Points Ordinance and the resolution there, if there is any pecuniary, direct or indirect, please make the declaration. All right, Mr. Wuchiwai. Chairman, thank you. As the Secretary said, and this is of a technical nature, but if I may put a question here. In July 2012, we've amended the 4 bylaws. Isn't it right, as part of the normal procedure, to have a look at all these provisions to make sure that there would not be any discrepancies between the 2 sets of tunnels in terms of text and in terms of section numbers and so on? And it's because of an omission that we have to make these amendments at this time. And how can the government make sure that there will be no recurrence of this in future? Second, as far as we understand, the Route 3 and WHC, the speed limit is 80 kilometers per hour. Now there is a reference of 70 kilometers per hour. Would this cause any confusion? Would this lead to some motorists being caught by law innocently? All right, let me address the first question first. In July 2012, we have standardized the road markings and road signs and so on, and amended the 4 bylaws. I must admit that there was an omission. We haven't quite amended the schedule to CAP 375, and as a result, there are discrepancies there between the 2. Now, as soon as we have spotted this situation, we have reviewed the existing mechanism to make sure that in future, when it comes to legislative amendments, we will be extra careful to prevent this from happening again. Now, in an ideal world, in the last amendment exercise, the schedule to 375 should have been covered. That much we admit, and I hope that members will support this exercise so that we can get everything done. Second question regarding the confusion that is likely to be caused. All right, let me address this question under 374, Section 10. The heavy-duty vehicles, including buses, medium-sized vehicles, and heavy goods vehicles, when they are running on roads, including tunnels in Hong Kong, the maximum limit is actually 70 kilometers per hour. Now, the drivers of all these heavy vehicles, buses and lorries and so on, they're aware of this speed limit. In some private tunnels, the speed limit may be 80 kilometers per hour, but the drivers of these vehicles themselves are aware that they're not supposed to go beyond 70 kilometers per hour at any time. So when enforcement is done by the police or the tunnel operators, they would have regard to CAPS 374 regarding the speed limit for heavy-duty vehicles. Let me cite one more example to make it easier to understand. We have some expressways. The speed limit may be 80 or 110 kilometers per hour, like the Lantau Expressway. Now, but the heavy-duty vehicles under the law cannot go beyond 70 kilometers per hour, and there will not be any confusion. So 374 will be overriding. Mr. Teng Ka-ki. Chairman, this term of LegCo has been in session for 7 to 8 months. I'm wondering why you didn't bring this forward on the 10th of October. When did you become aware of this omission? I presume that you didn't become aware of this until a case has been listed for hearing in court, and you found out that you couldn't deduct any demerit points. Now, when did you become aware of this omission? Did you find out about it yourself, or was it exposed during criminal prosecution? I believe that this won't happen ever again, but I'd like to find out about it. Now, there is a vacuum period for 9 to 10 months. How many cases of infringement of road traffic ordinance in which points couldn't be deducted? Now, you mentioned the private tunnels. There are 3 types of tunnels, BOT tunnel, private tunnels, and the Disco Bay tunnel. Now, the Disco Bay tunnel, I think this has been amended, hasn't it?
Thank you, Mr. So. Chairman, in response to Mr. Tang's question, last year on July 20, when we had the amendment passed for the bylaw, as the Deputy Secretary said, the tunnel company staff have been enforcing the law. But so there's been progress in law, and it takes time for law enforcement to happen. And during the process, when we have to submit cases to facilitate prosecution, the relevant staff found that technically that could be because of the amendments. There could be some areas that did not tally. And therefore, we looked into the problem, and immediately we took a step to see what's wrong and draft what you found today, the relevant amendments. So actually, we have actually taken quick action to proceed with our work. Last year, after July 20, following the amendments of bylaws, so far, in terms of our law enforcement, Mr. Tam would want to know how many cases there are that we were not able to deduct marks. In fact, there are 9 cases that actually happened to the Eastern Harbour crossing. Mr. Tang also mentioned about the private tunnel linking Discovery Bay. I can tell you that the Discovery Bay tunnel is not affected at all, because when we made the amendment to the bylaws last time, Discovery Bay tunnel was not covered. And for the Discovery Bay tunnel, and the offence listed in the schedule for that is the same as the schedule that we looked at. So there's no worry. There's no need for any worry for that. Ka-ki, I believe that I understand and I support the amendments to the bylaws. But I've got two questions. One is concerning the issue of enforcement. Speeding. Not to mention in tunnels, but also, when the police are trying to enforce the law against speeding, there are challenges. For example, challenges from the reliability of the machines, and also there were drivers who successfully overturned the case. You all know that the enforcement of the speeding ordinances for the various tunnels actually varies from place to place. Sometimes there are machines used that actually have been used for more than 10 years. So the standards of enforcement vary from place to place. So when you try to ascertain whether there's overspeeding, there could be challenges. So what is the government going to do with it? And secondly, the operators of the few tunnels involved, when they came up with the speed monitoring equipment, are they required to meet certain standards, and that the Transport Department does monitor whether the machines are up to standard? And thirdly, say if there were someone now who challenged the standards of reliability of the equipment, have you received any cases that such challenge arose? Because, you have the penalties for violations of the points or DOP regulations, but various drivers may have different understanding of how you carry out the enforcement. So what is the Transport Department doing? And just then you mentioned there were 9 cases that happened at Eastern Harbour Crossing. What have you done with the cases? Now we have a vacuum period. So in dealing with those cases, have you come across any legal difficulties? Does that mean that you may have to let the people involved in those cases off the hook? Who would answer? Chairman? I'll try to answer Mr. Kwok's questions. Firstly, for enforcement of speeding, law against speeding, in fact, for tunnels, whether we use laser guns or other equipment, we do have some sets of standards. In Hong Kong, whether in government tunnels or private tunnels, we do ask third-party experts to check on the reliability, preciseness of the speed monitoring equipment, as well as whether the design fits the requirement. The most important is that we want to collect evidence through the equipment so that the evidence can be admitted by the court and used as evidence for prosecution. So we do have monitoring. And tunnel companies themselves, when faced with challenges, would hire experts to evaluate the evidence collected. And they will also carry out periodic adjustments and testing of the equipment. As for their enforcement work, our understanding is that so no one has actually done less in enforcement because of the inconsistencies in the bylaws. Actually, since July 20, enforcement has remained the same. So even though there might be individual cases that because of the inconsistencies in the law, that points failed to be deducted, but there could still be penalties imposed. So on the principle of confidentiality, private tunnel companies, when and how it enforced the law, they were not obliged to disclose to our staff. So this is to in fact, ensure that there will be no tipping off of anyone. And we think that that's an appropriate approach. So far, as I mentioned just then, we've seen that since July 20, so far there have been 9 cases for which we could not deduct any points. But we know that there are areas that do not tally in the bylaws. So for the 9 outstanding cases, we would not make any arrangements for the driving offence points deduction. Yeah, Chairman, I wanted to know more, even though you said that you are sure about the standards, but honestly, for the police, they were challenged themselves, and they made changes following challenges, and they had to enhance the standards of their equipment. So can you tell us, for the few tunnels involved, how long have the equipment been used? And when did you do the standardization? I think you need to give us the answer so that we can rest assured. We do want to see that the bylaws could be implemented, and yet you need to reduce any chances for challenges against the laws. If you don't have the information now, please give them to us after the meeting. When were the equipment installed at the various tunnels? When was the last time for testing? And also whether their reliability were challenged in the past. If you haven't done that, please ask the Transport Department to make arrangements with the companies. Yes, I agree. If you want the law to be usefully or effectively enforced, you need to answer those questions. Tang Ka-ki, next. I don't know whether we have a second meeting, but I'd like to know about the timetable. Today we have an open meeting, and if we send out the message that there could be people who got away from having the points deducted, then I think it's not good, and we need to know when the law will really come into effect. And also, there could be people who are already aware that companies fail to deduct points from them. So at this stage, what other publicity work or what else we could do to prevent against speeding or send a strong signal to people against speeding? Just then you said Discovery Bay Tunnel as a private tunnel needs to comply with the cap 375 in the Ordinance. 374, excuse me. But just then you said that since it is a solely privately run tunnel, it's not obliged to whether there have been any violations of the law. I didn't really get it very clearly. I think in your response to Dr. Kwok, you said that private operators are not obliged to explain to the Transport Department. So how are we going to enforce the law if that's the case? Chairman, just then I was saying that if we want to know enforcement at private tunnels, we could obtain information and they would give them to us. I was saying that when and where they try to enforce the law, that is at what time on the day and where, they need not disclose that information to the third person, because this involves about fairness and so forth. So, Mr. Tang, if you want to know the situation of enforcement and concrete data about enforcement, we can get them from private operators. Yes, I'm particularly concerned about Discovery Bays. The developer of the area is applying for taxis and tour coaches to go on to the island, to Discovery Bay, and that will increase traffic flow. So if there were loopholes in the law, we wouldn't want to see them. I'm sure there will be increased traffic flow to the area. So we need to make clear whether the operator can comply with the requirements in CAP 374. Yes, I agree. Just then, Mr. So said that we do monitor operations of private tunnels. So we'll go back and see what data we can find or what figures we can find on what they've done. And in response to your first two questions, first on the timetable, our plan is that we do hope to get members' approval, support as soon as possible, and hope that you can accept a proposal, and so we can move the motion in LegCo as soon as possible. If we can get member support today, then we can go through all the sections, and then we hope to, following today's meeting, around May 13, the Secretary will issue a notice so that by the 29th he can move the motion. This is positive vetting. Should members agree and support this proposal, then if the motion is moved on 29, then it could be moved and become effective on the same day. I then would have confidence that should it be passed on the 29 and the amendments come into effect, then there would not be more than 9 cases where violators are spared from getting their points deducted. And secondly, during this period, in fact, not just now, once actually we found that there were cases of inconsistencies, we have asked the tunnel companies and the police to actually strictly enforce the law. For example, tunnel companies should, within the area of the tunnels, monitor speed limits and speeds of vehicles, and also police should also enhance their enforcement. And we haven't seen any actually changes in the pattern of law enforcement. Why? Next. I think we all understand that this is a technical amendment and we'll support the changes. But we're just worried that, May 29, whether you could actually submit the amendments to LegCo in time on May 29. Just then you mentioned there were 9 cases where points could not be deducted. So apart from improved publicity, what other things would you do? Or, my understanding is that, the CAP 375, actually embodies a big spirit. I think technical amendments are technical amendments. Even though the inconsistencies in the wordings make prosecutions difficult. No, there's no problem with prosecutions. According to the bylaw, we can still make prosecutions and impose penalties. It's just that the bylaws have stopped us from deducting points. Because the schedule in 375 and the wordings in bylaws are inconsistent, therefore we could not deduct points. But still, according to the bylaws, we can impose penalties. Yes. So my question is, Mr. Chen, you said that you admitted that there could be omissions by the Transport Department, but to us, well, the situation is quite alarming to us because a legal amendment, should have come about with input from DOJ. Of course, we need to make sure and find out what led to the omission so that there would not be, the same thing happening again. We have to follow standard process of legal amendment. I hope that what happened is just an occasional event.
Thank you very much for the comments. I believe that this is only an isolated case. We have learned from this experience. We have, in fact, reviewed the mechanism. We have alerted the relevant colleagues and department to be extra doubly careful in future to prevent any recurrence of similar thing again. I must admit that it is an isolated incident. Did it ever happen before? Well, I dare not say there wasn't, because I cannot be absolutely clear about the record. But even if there were previous occurrences, we the number would not be high. Now there was some omission. We admit to that in this in the last exercise. I think the most important thing is to learn from the experience and prevent it from happening again, and get on with the amendment in this exercise. And I appeal for members' understanding. Well, I've been managing tunnels for so long. I've never seen any omission like this. First ever I come across this. Well, this is filling us with concerns. We set up such a subcommittee over such a minor matter because we'd like to find out about this very issue. Any further points? If not, legal advisor, please. Or the law draftsman, can you take us through the amendment? Appendix 3, isn't it? Yes, Chairman. There are two ordinances to be amended. Road Traffic Ordinance, Cap 374, and the Schedule 2, Cap 374 or 375. Schedule 1 is the corresponding amendment to Schedule 2. Other than the references to all provisions, we'd like to bring them into effect as soon as possible. This mentions 26th of April, but we will be amending this by notice in the Gazette. We like to have these technical amendments endorsed as soon as possible. Let's refer to Schedule 1 before we move on to Schedule 2. Schedule 1 amends Schedule 11 to Cap 374. If the court rules that Schedule 1 offence has been committed, then driving improvement course can be mandated. And Schedule 1 refers to all these numbers, and that is all these numbers are referred to in Cap 375. We have recast the order in the numbering, so these are the consequential amendments. If members are okay with Schedule 1, then we can move on to Schedule 2. Schedule 2 is about the Road Traffic Driving Offence Points Ordinance. On the 20th of July last year, we made an amendment. This is the corresponding change as per that amendment. Here we have the new and old references included in the schedule, and this is so that there can be no disputes. The old section numbers and all section numbers will be included. This shows the government position that whether the offences were committed before and after the amendment, there will not be any difference because of the changes in the references. So we have included certain things. In fact, I would like to include both the old and the new references. Well, you mentioned the omission a moment ago in Schedule 2. You have included all these references to rectify the omissions. Now, from July the 20th to the commencement of this ordinance, what's going to happen to the applicability if someone commits the offence during this interim period? Now, you're trying to tidy this up, and the DOJ or, in fact, the tunnel operators, can they on the basis of these amendments, review the cases. Under Cap 375, the DOP is incurred when the offenders is found guilty or is convicted. Now, from the time the offense is committed to the time conviction is secured, there is a time lag. Now, when the offense is committed, if the schedule is there, then the person can be convicted. Let me clarify that the EHC, the case hasn't quite been completed, has it? Now, for the 7 cases, DOP couldn't be incurred because they committed the offense in the schedule before the 20th of July, and there's some speeding in the EHC. Now, that happened before the amendment here. They were convicted before that, and that for these 9 cases, nothing can be done about it. So if tomorrow someone were to commit the offense, then you would not prosecute them until after the amendments have been endorsed. Yes, precisely. If we can get on with it, then we can keep on top of the situation. So the retrospective effect, now we have to issue summonses to them. Perhaps I defer to Michael. He's really familiar with this. Can you give us the date, please? Now, after the amendment on the 20th of July, there is discrepancy with the regulation, and if there is an offence, they will prosecute under the bylaws. Now, let's say the person appears in court in December. He admits to the offence, and if the amendment hasn't been endorsed, we cannot really incur any DOP. Now, but if we collect the particulars of the driver, and if the court, if we can amend the legislation before conviction, then we can incur the DOP. I mean, whether the DOP will be incurred would depend very much on whether we manage to amend 375 when the court convicts him. Dr. Kwok. So from for the 6 months up to the court convicts the person, there will not be any conviction during this period. That's point number 1. Second, if a motorist were to challenge you and they say that you're not being fair, you are delaying the case until such time as the amendment has been made. Now, they might question, they might challenge you as to why you didn't do so earlier. Maybe there could be some examples in this regard. As far as we know, the tunnel operators would proceed according to the normal procedure. Now, they have the picture taken, and they would take some time and go through some procedure to get the particulars of the drivers, and then they go by the procedures, they issue the summonses, and the case will be listed in court. If we manage to amend the legislation in time, there would be DOP deducted, so there will not be any action taken to delay or to advance the cases. But normally, it would the lead time would be 6 months. The usual practice would be no more than 6 months. Well, 6 months would be the time for the summonses to be issued, and the case has to be listed in court, and for conviction to be secured, it would take 8-9 months. So this practice has always been the practice all along, and there will be no changes, so it should be secure. You mentioned the 9 cases in which they were fined, but no DOP was deducted. How many cases do you have in which pictures were taken? And how many cases are there? For the EHC, there are DOP 3 points, 5 points, and 10 points. After 20th of July, 114 cases, 54 of which we haven't issued the summonses because we're collecting the particulars. For 51 cases, we have issued the summonses. They are awaiting court hearing. 9 verdict has been handed down as 5 points, 16 cases. And for others, they're still awaiting hearing. What about other tunnels? Tayscan Tunnel, 101 cases. I must say that because of the discrepancy in references in EHC, there are problems. Tayscan Tunnel, there are no problems at all. WHC speeding, there are no problems. Thailand Tunnel, there are no problems with speeding, but there are problems with a double white line. So the only problem is in relation to the EHC regarding speeding. The speaker's not coming through. There are scheduled offences, like Mr. Ng said a moment ago. They may cut the double white line, and they will attract a DOP. Mr. Ng already mentioned the case of speeding in EHC. There's under 10A offence. There are 9 cases for which the court has handed down the ruling, but because of the discrepancy, we cannot deduct any DOP. Dr. KWOK Ka-ki, for these 51 cases, altogether 110 odd cases, that's as of end of May. As you said, you will not deliberately delay the matter in issuing summonses and so on. Now, for these 110 cases, some of them will be issued with summonses before May or being handled in court. Let me supplement, Chairman. Now, what we have to look at is the speeding at EHC. Under the tunnel bylaws, the section number and the references are different, and we cannot deduct any DOP. Now, that only happened in EHC in relation to speeding. For other tunnels, the technical amendments did not give rise to any discrepancies. Tayscan and WHC for speeding cases under normal circumstances, we can deduct the DOP after conviction. Now, I think we have to focus our attention on EHC. The my colleagues have already reminded members that we asked the tunnel operators to enforce the law, that they take the pictures and they would give 3 weeks' time for particulars of the drivers to be made available. And after the summonses have been issued, the cases will be listed in court according to the information in April and May. In relation to speeding cases in EHC, there are no cases that are listed for any hearing. Now, in terms of listing in courts, this is not something that the law enforcement agencies can interfere with. But in April and May, they haven't got any cases listed for hearing. Now, Mr. Ng reminded members that, in fact, there are 50-odd cases that are awaiting trial. As to how soon they will be listed for trial, we will be liaising with the court. We'll try to find out about the progress. But as of today, the information that we can give information is that in May, there will not be any cases listed for trial. But as the Deputy Secretary said, if members can endorse the amendment by May, then after conviction in court, we can still deduct the DOP thereafter.
Please carry on. Now, amendments in Schedule 2 for the 4 tunnel bylaws. We've made relevant amendments for each C, Cal 205 of the EHC bylaw in the schedule. We will add July 20, the new references. Before is section 10 and 10A. After the amendment, it's become 11 and 12. The content is the same, just because of the differences in the references, so that's why we've made the new additions. And as for the original references, we have added headings saying that the original references refer to July 20 bylaws that became effective before July 20th last year. So there were references to the old and new sections. We also hope that through the resolution, we can, in future, in an appropriate time, remove the old references, because they actually will not be necessary. Once the time is right, we think that they can be removed, but we don't know the exact day when they can be repealed. Therefore, we would actually remove them later through the inclusion of a new effective date. Now, the amendment for Tate's content is the same. Under 33, there'll be new references. Just in the director said that besides HC for the other tunnels bylaws, in order to avoid disputes and also to make these sections clearer, even if there were no changes, the prosecution will not be affected, but we still like to make use of this chance to make uniform amendments in the references and the use of wordings as well, so that all the 4 bylaws were dealt with in the same way. And then for Tate's tunnel, there is a session head saying which are effective before and which are effective after July 20th. And as I said about EHC, for the old references, we will repeal them at an appropriate time. As for West Harbour Crossing and Titan Tunnel, same is done. For WHC, the description is very simple, Section 7 including all offences. But now, with the change, we list clearly under Section 7 the differences between normal drivers and people holding P licenses and the DOP for speeding for these various categories of people. For WHC, the bylaw is the same. There's a new heading showing clearly which are old and which are new references. And for the old references, we add a section stating that they would be repealed at a later time. And lastly, for the Titan Tunnel, same is done, adding new references and maintaining old references. There's also a new heading differentiating between the old and new references. So those are the technical amendments. Members, any other views? If not, then I would regard that the subcommittee agree with the amendments and urge the government to implement them as soon as possible. But let me point out that the omission that we noted this time, I hope that you'll pay attention to it. This is omission with minor consequences, but we don't want to see omissions again. Meeting adjourned.
Aye.